Lieutenant Marcus Chen stepped off the transport shuttle onto the deck of the GSV Retribution, his boots clicking against the metal flooring with a sound that seemed to echo through the vast hangar bay. Around him, alien crew members moved with practiced efficiency, their various forms creating a symphony of controlled chaos. The Galactic Defense Force had always prided itself on diversity, but Marcus had never seen so many different species working together in one place. A towering Krex officer approached him, its forearms moving in what Marcus recognized as a formal greeting gesture. The creature's crystalline exoskeleton caught the harsh overhead lights, creating prismatic patterns that danced across the hangar walls. "Lieutenant Chen, I presume," the alien said, its voice a harmonious blend of tones produced by specialized vocal chambers. "I am Commander Zethka. Welcome to the 47th Expeditionary Battalion." Marcus saluted, trying not to stare at the commander's impressive height of nearly 3 meters. "Thank you, sir. I'm honored to be assigned to such a prestigious unit." Commander Zethka's compound eyes studied Marcus with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. "Prestigious, yes, but also dangerous. We are often sent where others fear to tread." The commander gestured toward a group of soldiers engaged in combat drills nearby. "Your species is still relatively new to galactic warfare, Lieutenant. The 47th has been operational for over 2 centuries. You will need to prove yourself quickly." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Marcus observed the crew with growing fascination. Slender Etherians floated past, their translucent bodies glowing softly with bioluminescent patterns. Massive Thrakari lumbered by, their rocky skin scarred from countless battles. The diversity was astounding, yet there was an underlying tension he couldn't quite identify. "Tell me, Lieutenant," Zethka continued, "what do you know about human military history?" Marcus straightened. "I studied at the Academy, sir. Earth's conflicts, the unification wars, the development of our space forces. Standard curriculum. Standard, yes." The commander's tone carried an odd inflection, but perhaps incomplete. "The galaxy has a long memory, Lieutenant. Longer than your species might expect." They arrived at the officers' quarters, a section of the ship that hummed with quiet efficiency. Other officers nodded respectfully to the commander, but Marcus noticed their glances lingering on him with what seemed like curiosity mixed with something else. Suspicion, perhaps? "Your quarters," Zethka announced, stopping before a standard door marked with both galactic standard and human numerals. "Dinner is at 1900 hours. I suggest you rest. Tomorrow we begin preparations for our next mission." Alone in his quarters, Marcus unpacked his belongings with methodical precision. The room was sparse but functional, designed to accommodate the needs of multiple species. As he arranged his few personal items, he couldn't shake the feeling that his arrival had created ripples throughout the ship. The way conversations had stopped when he passed. The careful way officers had chosen their words around him. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Marcus activated the communication panel, and the face of his academy friend, Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, appeared on the screen. She was stationed on a research vessel near the galactic rim, far from the front lines. "Marcus, how's the famous 47th treating you?" she asked, her smile bright against the blue glow of the comm display. "Still getting my bearings," Marcus replied. "Everyone seems professional enough, but there's something I can't put my finger on. Like they're all sharing a joke I'm not in on." Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "You know, I heard something interesting the other day. One of the Altarian archaeologists here mentioned finding some old records about human involvement in galactic conflicts. Pre-official contact stuff. Probably just rumors, but you might want to keep your ears open." After the call ended, Marcus found himself staring out the small porthole at the stars beyond. Earth was somewhere out there, a small blue dot in an incomprehensibly vast galaxy. Humanity had joined the Galactic Defense Force only 50 years ago, after making official first contact. Before that, Earth had been isolated, working on its own technological development while the rest of the galaxy waged wars and formed alliances. At dinner, Marcus was introduced to his fellow officers. There was Lieutenant Vex, an insectoid Chitauri whose compound eyes never seemed to blink. Captain Thorak, a Norvani whose fur changed colors with his emotions, currently displaying cautious yellow patterns. Dr. Elena Vasquez, another human who had been with the battalion for 3 years, greeted him with obvious relief. Finally, another human, she said, sliding her tray next to his at the long dining table. "I was beginning to think I was some kind of specimen." How long since the last human officer? Marcus asked, sampling what appeared to be a protein synthesis that actually tasted decent. About 18 months, Dr. Vasquez replied. Lieutenant Williams, good officer. Transferred to a desk job after. She paused, glancing around the table where several alien officers were engaged in their own conversations. After the Zarian incident, Marcus waited for more details, but Dr. Vasquez had grown quiet, focusing intently on her meal. The Zarian incident wasn't something he remembered from his briefings, but, then again, operational details were often classified above his current clearance level. After dinner, Marcus wandered the ship's corridors, familiarizing himself with the layout. The Retribution was a massive vessel, capable of housing over 3,000 crew members and their equipment. As he passed the ship's archives, he noticed the door was slightly ajar. Curious, he peered inside. The archives were dimly lit, rows of data storage units humming softly in the climate-controlled environment. A single figure sat at a terminal near the back, fingers dancing over holographic displays. It was Archivist Kelm, an elderly Vorthon whose species was known for their obsessive attention to detail and perfect memory. Lieutenant Chen, Kelm said without turning around. I wondered when you would find your way here. I was just exploring the ship, sir. I didn't mean to disturb you. Kelm finally turned, his large dark eyes reflecting the glow of the displays. Disturb? No, not at all. I was actually hoping we might have a conversation. Your species has a fascinating history, one that perhaps has been somewhat sanitized for official records. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Sir? Tell me, Lieutenant, what do you know about the Terran Liberation Front? Or the Ghost Fleet that appeared during the siege of Altair Prime? Names that appear in fragments, mentions that are quickly classified or dismissed as historical errors. The archivist's words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus realized that his assignment to the 47th Expeditionary Battalion might be more complicated than he had ever imagined. Somewhere in the ship's vast database were records that could change everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in galactic history. I think, Marcus said carefully, that I have a lot to learn. Archivist Kelm smiled, an expression that on a Vorthan face looked both kind and slightly predatory. Indeed you do, Lieutenant. Indeed you do. Marcus spent the night staring at the ceiling of his quarters, Archivist Kelm's words echoing in his mind. When the ship's artificial dawn cycle began, he was already dressed and heading to the combat training deck. Physical exercise had always helped him think, and right now, his thoughts were a tangled mess of questions and half-formed suspicions. The training deck was already occupied when he arrived. A group of Krek soldiers were engaged in what looked like a complex martial arts routine, their crystalline bodies moving with surprising grace. In another section, Thrakari warriors practiced with massive weapons that would have been impossible for most species to lift. And in the far corner, Dr. Vasquez was working through a series of exercises on equipment designed for human physiology. Couldn't sleep either? She asked as Marcus approached, toweling sweat from her forehead. Too much to process, Marcus admitted, beginning his own warm-up routine. Dr. Vasquez, can I ask you something? Elena. And yes, but maybe not here. She glanced around the training deck where several alien soldiers were within earshot. Meet me in Medical Base 7 after shift rotation. It's usually empty then. The morning briefing took place in the ship's main strategic center, a massive chamber filled with holographic displays showing star charts, fleet positions, and tactical data. Commander Zethka stood at the center, his forearms gesturing to highlight various points of interest on the three-dimensional map that filled the room's center. Our next assignment comes directly from High Command, the commander announced. Intelligence has located what appears to be a Shadowkin forward operating base in the Kepler sector. The 47th will conduct reconnaissance and, if the opportunity presents itself, neutralize the threat. Marcus knew about the Shadowkin from his academy training. They were an aggressive species that had been raiding galactic trade routes for decades, using advanced stealth technology that made them nearly impossible to detect until they struck. Their ships seemed to appear from nowhere, devastating entire convoys before vanishing back into the dark spaces between stars. Lieutenant Chen, Commander Zethka's voice cut through his thoughts. You will be assigned to Captain Thorax's reconnaissance team. Your background and sensor analysis will be valuable for detecting Shadowkin signatures. After the briefing, Marcus found himself walking alongside Captain Thorak, the Norvani officer whose fur had shifted to a contemplative blue-green pattern. "First mission with the 47th can be overwhelming," Thorak said, his voice carrying the slight growl that was characteristic of his species. "But Commander Zethka chose you for a reason." "What kind of reason?" Marcus asked. Thorak's fur rippled with colors that Marcus couldn't interpret. "The commander has been with the 47th longer than anyone except Archivist Kelm. He remembers things that others prefer to forget. Perhaps he sees something in humanity that others have overlooked." That afternoon, Marcus made his way to Medical Bay 7 as Elena had suggested. The bay was indeed empty, its sterile white surfaces and advanced medical equipment gleaming under the soft lighting. Elena was waiting for him, sitting on one of the examination tables with a datapad in her hands. "I've been thinking about what you might have heard from Kelm," she began without preamble. "There are things about humanity's involvement in galactic affairs that don't match the official timeline. Things that make some of our alien colleagues nervous." "What kind of things?" Elena activated her datapad, displaying what appeared to be a star chart with several systems highlighted in red. 3 years ago, I was treating a wounded Etherian officer who had been injured during a Shadowkin raid. While he was under sedation, he kept repeating coordinates and dates. When I looked them up later, they corresponded to systems that had been attacked by unknown forces 20 years before official first contact. Marcus studied the display. Unknown forces? Ships using technology that matched no known galactic civilization. Fast, efficient, leaving no survivors to identify them. The attacks always targeted Shadowkin bases or slave trading operations. Someone was out there fighting the galaxy's monsters while the rest of us pretended not to notice. The implications were staggering. If Elena was right, it meant that humans had been active in galactic space decades before the official first contact. But that contradicted everything Marcus had learned about Earth's history, everything about humanity's supposedly peaceful introduction to galactic civilization. "There's more," Elena continued. "Last year, I was reviewing medical records for the battalion, cross-referencing injury patterns with known weapon types. I found references to wounds caused by kinetic projectiles, high-velocity impacts consistent with what we call railgun technology. The thing is, these injuries were documented 40 years ago, and no galactic civilization was using kinetic weapons at that time. They all relied on energy-based systems." Marcus felt his worldview shifting. Railguns were one of humanity's signature technologies, developed during Earth's unification wars. The idea that similar weapons had been used in galactic conflicts decades before first contact suggested something extraordinary and terrifying. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena's expression was serious. "Because I think you're here for a reason. Zethka doesn't just randomly request human officers. He specifically asked for someone with your background in sensor analysis and tactical assessment. I think he's planning to show you something, and when he does, you're going to need to be prepared for the truth." That evening, Marcus returned to the archives. Archivist Kelm was there again as if he had been waiting. This time, the Vorthan didn't pretend to be surprised by Marcus's arrival. "I have been thinking about our conversation," Kelm said, his large eyes reflecting the soft glow of the archive displays. "There are records here that paint a very different picture of human involvement in galactic history. But they are fragmented, classified, or dismissed as clerical errors." "Show me," Marcus said. Kelm's fingers moved across the holographic interface, calling up files that flickered with restricted access warnings. "Here, a report from the Battle of Zerion Prime 43 years ago. Shadowkin forces were besieging a Krex mining colony. The official record states that a Galactic Defense Force patrol arrived just in time to drive off the attackers." The display showed a standard military report, but Kelm highlighted several sections. "Look at the weapon signatures detected during the battle, energy signatures that match no known GDF technology. And here, testimony from survivors describing ships that seem to appear from nowhere, engage the Shadowkin with devastating efficiency, then disappear again." Marcus read the highlighted passages with growing amazement. The survivor accounts described tactics that were distinctly human, hit-and-run operations that prioritized civilian protection over military glory. But according to official history, humans hadn't even known about the existence of other intelligent life at that time. "There's more," Kelm continued, pulling up additional files. The Altair incident, the liberation of Cygnus Station, the mysterious fleet that broke the siege of New Geneva. In each case, unknown forces appeared to combat the galaxy's worst threats, then vanished without claiming credit or making contact with galactic authorities. But why keep it secret? Marcus asked. If humans were out there helping, fighting the good fight, why hide it? Kelm's expression grew thoughtful. Because, Lieutenant, the truth is more complex than simple heroism. The forces that appeared during these conflicts were not official human government operations. They were something else entirely, something that the current human administration on Earth might find embarrassing. As Marcus walked back to his quarters that night, his mind raced with possibilities. If Kelm and Elena were right, then humanity's true history in space was far older and more complicated than anyone had admitted. And somehow his assignment to the 47th Expeditionary Battalion was connected to that hidden history. In the depths of space around them, the ship continued its journey toward the Kepler sector, and whatever truths awaited there, Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling that he was about to discover that everything he thought he knew about his own species was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous story. The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler sector, with the characteristic shimmer that always made Marcus's teeth ache. Through the observation deck's massive windows, he could see the distant stars that marked their destination, a supposedly empty system where Shadowkin forces had established a hidden base. First time seeing a stealth approach? Dr. Vasquez asked, joining him at the observation window. The ship had gone to silent running protocols, reducing all non-essential systems to minimize their sensor signature. It's impressive, Marcus admitted. Around them, the crew moved with the quiet efficiency of a unit that had performed this operation many times before. Elena, I've been thinking about what you told me yesterday, about the weapon signatures and the medical records. Elena glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. What about them? If you're right about the timeline, about humans being active in space before first contact, then someone on Earth had to know. You don't just accidentally develop interstellar travel and advanced weapons systems. There had to be a program funding infrastructure. That's what worries me, Elena replied. Because if there was a secret program, and if the current Earth government doesn't know about it, then who was running it? And more importantly, where did those people go? Before Marcus could respond, the ship's communication system activated. All reconnaissance team members to Briefing Room 7. Mission briefing commences in 10 minutes. Briefing Room 7 was smaller than the main strategic center, designed for specialized team meetings. Captain Thorak was already there when Marcus arrived, his fur displaying the muted grays and browns that indicated focused concentration. Lieutenant Vex clicked his mandibles in greeting, while Specialist Korth, a massive Thrakari whose rocky skin was marked with the scars of countless battles, nodded silently from his position near the holographic display. Commander Zethka entered the room with his characteristic precise movements, carrying a data pad that he connected to the room's central display system. Intelligence has provided us with updated information about our target, he announced, and the display flickered to life, showing a detailed star chart of the system they were approaching. The Shadowkin base is located on the third moon of the gas giant Kepler 47b. Zethka continued. Long-range scans suggest a significant military presence, including what appears to be a shipyard facility. Our mission is to gather detailed intelligence about their capabilities and, if possible, determine the extent of their operations in this sector. Marcus studied the tactical display, noting the orbital mechanics and possible approach vectors. Sir, the gravitational fields around that gas giant will make stealth approaches difficult. Any ship trying to reach the moon will have to navigate several radiation bands that could interfere with our cloaking systems. An astute observation, Lieutenant, Zethka replied, which is why we will be using alternative transportation methods. The display changed to show technical specifications for what Marcus recognized as a Krex stealth pod, a small vessel designed for covert insertion operations. Unlike human spacecraft, which relied primarily on speed and maneuverability, Krex technology emphasized invisibility and patience. The reconnaissance team will deploy in 2 stealth pods, Zethka explained. Lieutenant Chen, your sensor expertise will be crucial for detecting Shadowkin technology, which has evolved considerably since your academy training. The data we gather will determine whether the 47th launches a full assault or requests additional support from the fleet. After the briefing, Marcus found himself in the pod preparation bay, running through pre-flight checks with Specialist Korth. The Thrakari's massive hands moved with surprising delicacy over the control interfaces. Their rocky fingers adapted for both combat and precision work. "First stealth mission?" Korth asked, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Yes, sir." "Good. Veterans sometimes get overconfident. New officers stay alert." Korth activated a series of diagnostic routines and the pod systems hummed to life around them. "Commander Zethka requested you specifically for this mission." "That's unusual for new battalion members." Marcus was beginning to notice a pattern in these conversations. "Specialist Korth, in your experience with the 47th, have you worked with many human officers?" Korth's scarred face turned toward him, small eyes studying Marcus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Few humans volunteer for frontline battalions. Most prefer support roles, technical positions, safer assignments." The Thrakari paused, considering his words carefully. "But the humans who do serve with combat units, they have particular qualities: persistence, adaptability, and sometimes knowledge they don't realize they possess." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, Captain Thorak approached their pod, his fur displaying the orange and red patterns that indicated excitement, mixed with anticipation. "Time for deployment," he announced. "The Shadowkin base will be at optimal approach angle in 30 minutes. The stealth pod launched from the Retribution's hangar bay with barely a whisper. Its advanced propulsion systems designed to minimize any energy signature that might be detected by enemy sensors. Marcus found himself pressed back into his acceleration couch as they began their approach to the gas giant, following a carefully calculated trajectory that would use the planet's magnetic field to mask their presence. Through the pod's small viewing port, Marcus could see Kepler 47b growing larger, its swirling atmosphere painted in shades of amber and crimson by the system's twin stars. The gas giant's moons appeared as tiny points of light, but the pod's sensors gradually resolved more detail as they drew closer. "Contact," Lieutenant Vex announced from the pilot's position, his compound eyes focused on the sensor displays. Multiple artificial structures on the target moon, confirming Shadowkin energy signatures. Marcus leaned forward to study the sensor readings, his training automatically analyzing the patterns of electromagnetic emissions. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Captain, those aren't just Shadowkin signatures. I'm detecting technology that doesn't match any known galactic civilization." Captain Thorak's fur shifted to deep blues and purples, colors that Marcus had learned indicated serious concern. "Explain." "The power generation systems show efficiency ratings that exceed current galactic standards by at least 30%, Marcus said, his fingers dancing over the sensor controls to gather more data. "And the construction materials. They're using alloys that shouldn't be possible with known metallurgy techniques." Specialist Korth leaned over to examine the readings, his massive frame making the pod feel even more cramped. "Those signatures," he rumbled. "I've seen them before. During the Zirian incident." The mention of Zirian sent a chill through the small cabin. Marcus remembered Dr. Vasquez mentioning Lieutenant Williams and the Zirion incident. But the official records had been classified above his clearance level. "Sir," Marcus said carefully, "what exactly happened at Zirion?" Captain Thorak and Specialist Korth exchanged a look that spoke of shared secrets and difficult memories. Finally, Thorak spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Zirion was where we first encountered evidence of the Ghost Fleet. Ships using technology that seemed to be decades ahead of anything in the galactic database. They appeared during a Shadowkin raid, destroyed the enemy forces with devastating efficiency, then vanished without making contact." "The Ghost Fleet?" Marcus asked. "Unidentified vessels that have been appearing at critical battles for the past 4 decades, Korth explained. "Always fighting on the side of galactic peace. Always targeting the worst threats to civilian populations. But no one knows who they are or where they come from." Marcus felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. The medical records Elena had shown him, the weapon signatures that Archivist Kelm had discovered, the mysterious forces that had been protecting the galaxy for decades before official first contact. "Sir, I think I might know who they are." But before he could explain his growing suspicions, Lieutenant Vex hissed a warning from the pilot's position. "Multiple contacts incoming. Shadowkin patrol vessels approaching fast. They've detected us." The stealth pod shuddered as its cloaking system strained to maintain invisibility against increasingly powerful sensor sweeps. Outside, the darkness of space suddenly filled with the ominous shapes of Shadowkin vessels, their black hulls seeming to absorb the light from the distant stars. Marcus realized that they were about to learn firsthand what it meant to face the galaxy's most dangerous predators. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that this encounter might finally reveal the truth about humanity's secret history among the stars. The Shadowkin patrol ships moved through space like predators, their angular black hulls seeming to bend light around them. Marcus watched the sensor displays with growing dread as the enemy vessels began a systematic search pattern, their powerful scanners probing every cubic meter of space around the gas giant's moons. Cloaking integrity at 60% and falling, Lieutenant Vex whispered, his compound eyes reflecting the red warning lights that had begun flashing across the pod's control surfaces. Their scanning technology has improved significantly since our last encounter. Captain Thorax Fur had shifted to the deep blacks and grays that indicated extreme stress. How long until they detect us? At current deterioration rates, approximately 4 minutes, Vex replied. His mandibles clicking in what Marcus had learned was an expression of anxiety among the Chitauri. Specialist Korth studied the tactical display, his massive hands moving with surprising delicacy over the weapon's controls. We could try to break for open space, but those Shadowkin interceptors are faster than our pod. They'd run us down before we could reach the retribution. Marcus found himself studying the sensor readings with growing fascination. There was something familiar about the Shadowkin technology, something that triggered memories from his academy training. Captain, their scanning frequencies are operating in a very narrow band. It's efficient for detecting standard galactic technology, but it might have blind spots. What kind of blind spots? Thorak asked. Marcus's mind raced through the theoretical applications he had studied. If we could modulate our engine emissions to match the background radiation from the gas giant, we might be able to hide in the electromagnetic noise. It's a technique that requires precise timing and a thorough understanding of quantum field interactions. Korth turned his scarred face toward Marcus, small eyes studying the young human with new interest. That's a very specific solution, Lieutenant. Where did you learn about electromagnetic masking techniques? The question caught Marcus off guard. Now that he thought about it, the solution had come to him almost instinctively, as if he had encountered similar problems before. But that was impossible. His academy training had covered basic stealth principles, but nothing as advanced as quantum field manipulation. I'm not sure, Marcus admitted. It just seemed like the logical approach. Before anyone could respond to his puzzling answer, the pod's proximity alarms began screaming. A Shadowkin interceptor had appeared barely 100 meters away, its sensors locked onto their position. They've found us, Vex hissed, his hands moving rapidly over the pilot controls. Evasive maneuvers. The stealth pod lurched violently as Vex threw it into a complex evasion pattern, using the gas giant's gravitational field to slingshot them around the larger moons. Behind them, the Shadowkin interceptor followed with the relentless precision of a guided missile, its weapon systems charging for a killing shot. That ship is too fast, Korth rumbled, working frantically to boost their defensive systems. It's going to get a weapon lock within 30 seconds. Marcus stared at the tactical display, his mind processing trajectories and energy patterns with a clarity that surprised him. Once again, solutions were presenting themselves as if he had faced similar situations before. Lieutenant Vex, can you execute a retrograde spiral around the fourth moon? A what? Vex asked, confusion evident in his voice. Cut your engines for exactly 3 seconds, then restart them with a 40-degree vector change. The gravitational interaction should create a slingshot effect that will put us on an intercept course with the Shadowkin vessel. Thorax Fur displayed colors that Marcus couldn't interpret. Lieutenant, that maneuver would put us directly in their weapons range. We'd be destroyed. Not if we time it correctly, Marcus said, his hands moving over the sensor controls with increasing confidence. Their weapon systems are optimized for long-range targeting. At point-blank range, they'll need at least 2 seconds to recalibrate their targeting computers. That should give us enough time to get behind them and execute the electromagnetic masking protocol. The 3 alien officers stared at Marcus with expressions ranging from amazement to suspicion. Finally, Specialist Korth spoke, his voice carrying a note of recognition that made Marcus's skin crawl. Lieutenant, how do you know so much about Shadowkin weapons systems? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus realized that he didn't have an answer. The knowledge seemed to be coming from somewhere deep in his mind, like memories that weren't quite his own. Execute the maneuver, Captain Thorak ordered suddenly. Lieutenant Chen, prepare your masking protocol. If this works, we'll have a lot of questions for you later. Lieutenant Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly as he input the complex navigation commands. Retrograde spiral in 3, 2, 1. The pod's engines cut out, leaving them in free fall around the gas giant's moon. For 3 terrifying seconds, they drifted helplessly, while the Shadowkin interceptor closed the distance, its weapon systems fully charged and ready to fire. Then Vex restarted the engines with a 40-degree vector change, and physics took over. The gravitational field of the moon grabbed their new trajectory and accelerated them directly toward the enemy vessel, which suddenly found itself faced with a target approaching at an impossible angle. Marcus watched the interceptor's weapon systems struggle to recalibrate, just as he had predicted. For exactly 2 seconds, the Shadowkin vessel was unable to fire, and in that brief window, their pod slipped behind it and into the electromagnetic shadow created by the gas giant's radiation field. Masking protocol activated, Marcus announced, his hands moving over unfamiliar controls with disturbing familiarity. We should be invisible to their sensors now. The Shadowkin interceptor circled the area where their pod had vanished, its scanners probing desperately for any trace of their presence. After several minutes of fruitless searching, it finally gave up and rejoined the patrol formation. Incredible, Lieutenant Vex whispered. I've never seen anyone execute a maneuver like that. Where did you learn to pilot like that? I don't pilot, Marcus said, staring at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. I'm a sensor specialist. I shouldn't know how to do any of this. Captain Thorak moved closer, his fur now displaying the deep blues and purples that indicated serious concern. Lieutenant Chen, I think it's time you told us everything you know about your background. Your service record shows standard academy training and assignment rotation, but the techniques you just demonstrated are not taught in any galactic military institution. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Captain, I swear to you, I have no idea where that knowledge came from. It was like someone else was thinking through me. Specialist Korth studied Marcus with an expression that mixed suspicion with something that might have been recognition. There have been reports, the Thrakari said slowly, of humans displaying unusual tactical knowledge in combat situations. Skills that seem to come from nowhere, techniques that shouldn't exist in their training databases. What kind of reports? Marcus asked. Classified ones, Thorak replied. The kind that suggest humanity's involvement in galactic affairs might be more complex than anyone wants to admit. As their pod continued its stealthy approach to the Shadowkin base, Marcus found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about his own mind. The techniques he had used to evade the interceptor had felt natural, instinctive, as if he had performed them countless times before. But that was impossible, unless somewhere in the depths of his unconscious mind were memories that didn't belong to him. Memories of battles fought in the darkness between stars, of a secret war that had been raging for decades while the galaxy slept in ignorance. Through the pod's viewing port, the Shadowkin base grew larger, its alien architecture stark against the barren landscape of the moon's surface. Whatever secrets it contained, Marcus had the growing certainty that they would shed light on the mystery of his own impossible knowledge. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice that sounded almost like his own whispered that he was finally coming home. The Shadowkin base sprawled across the moon's surface like a metallic cancer, its twisted spires and angular structures defying conventional architectural logic. Through the pod's enhanced sensors, Marcus could see construction techniques that seemed to blend organic growth patterns with mechanical precision, creating buildings that looked more grown than built. That's not standard Shadowkin construction, Specialist Korth observed, his massive frame leaning over the sensor displays. I've seen their bases before. This is something different. Lieutenant Vex adjusted the sensor parameters, his compound eyes reflecting the eerie glow of the displays. The materials show composite signatures I don't recognize. These structures are incorporating technology from multiple sources. As they approached the landing zone Captain Thorak had selected, a crater on the moon's dark side that would provide cover for their insertion, Marcus found himself studying the base's layout with a growing sense of familiarity. The defensive positions, the overlapping fields of fire, The way the main structures were positioned to maximize protection from orbital bombardment. It all made perfect tactical sense. Too much sense. Captain, Marcus said slowly. Whoever designed this base understood human military doctrine. The positioning of those defensive towers follows principles that were developed during Earth's unification wars. Thorax fur shifted to the muted grays that indicated deep thought. Explain. The spacing between defensive positions creates interlocking fields of fire that would be devastating against conventional assault tactics. But more than that, the entire layout is designed to channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones. It's a strategy that Earth's military academies call defensive funnel theory. The problem is, that theory was classified at the highest levels and never shared with galactic forces. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If Marcus was right, then somehow human military knowledge had found its way into Shadowkin base construction. But the official timeline said that humans had never had contact with the Shadowkin before joining the Galactic Defense Force. Their pod touched down in the crater with barely a whisper, its landing systems designed for complete silence. As they prepared to disembark, Captain Thorak activated the team's communication gear, establishing an encrypted link with the Retribution. Base camp, this is Reconnaissance Team Alpha, Thorak reported. We have successfully inserted on target moon, beginning ground-based intelligence gathering. Commander Zethka's voice crackled through the comm system. Acknowledged Alpha Team. Be advised that we have detected increased Shadowkin fleet activity throughout the sector. Complete your mission as quickly as possible and prepare for immediate extraction. They emerged from the pod into the moon's thin atmosphere, their environmental suits automatically adjusting to the low gravity and harsh radiation environment. The landscape around them was a study in desolation, ancient impact craters scarring the surface like wounds that had never healed. Marcus activated his portable sensor array, sweeping the area for signs of Shadowkin patrols or automated defenses. What he found instead made his blood run cold. Captain, I'm detecting human technology signatures mixed with the Shadowkin systems. That's impossible, Lieutenant Vex hissed through the comm system. No, Marcus replied, his sensor readings becoming clearer as they approached the base perimeter. It's not impossible. It's deliberate. Someone has been sharing technology with the Shadowkin, someone who had access to classified human military systems. They moved through the lunar landscape like ghosts, using boulder fields and crater rims for cover as they approached the base's outer defenses. The closer they got, the more obvious it became that the installation was far more complex than intelligence had suggested. Look at those weapon emplacements, Specialist Korth whispered, pointing to a series of automated turrets that protected the base's main entrance. Those are hybrid systems, Shadowkin energy weapons mounted on human-designed targeting platforms. Marcus studied the defensive systems through his sensors, and once again felt that disturbing sense of familiarity. He found himself analyzing firing patterns and defensive weaknesses as if he had studied these exact systems before. The targeting computers are using prediction algorithms based on human combat doctrine. They're designed to counter specifically against Galactic Defense Force tactics. Captain Thorak crouched behind a large boulder, his fur displaying the deep blacks that indicated extreme caution. If someone has been sharing human technology with the Shadowkin, then every GDF operation in this sector has been compromised. The enemy knows exactly how we fight. They reached a vantage point that overlooked the base's central compound, and what Marcus saw there made his heart stop. In the center of the installation, clearly visible through his sensor array, was a landing pad occupied by ships that definitely weren't Shadowkin in origin. The vessels were sleek, angular, and painted in colors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. More importantly, their design language was unmistakably human, incorporating technological advances that were at least a generation ahead of anything in the current Earth fleet. Ghost Fleet, Specialist Korth rumbled, recognizing the ships immediately. But what are they doing here? Before anyone could answer, Marcus's sensor array detected movement in the shadows between the buildings. Figures were moving through the base with the confident precision of people who belonged there. As his sensors focused on them, his worst fears were confirmed. They were human, but these weren't GDF personnel or any humans that Marcus recognized from official records. They wore dark uniforms without insignia, and they moved with the deadly efficiency of elite military units. More disturbing still, they were clearly working in cooperation with the Shadowkin forces, coordinating activities with an ease that suggested long-standing partnership. "Captain," Marcus whispered into his comm unit, "we need to abort this mission immediately. What we're seeing here changes everything we thought we knew about the conflict." "Negative," Thorak replied. "We need more intelligence before we can make recommendations to command." "Can you get closer to those ships?" Marcus was about to protest when his sensor array detected something that made his blood freeze. One of the human figures had stopped moving and was looking directly toward their hiding position. Despite being over a kilometer away and concealed behind multiple layers of cover, the figure raised what appeared to be a handheld sensor device, and Marcus realized with growing horror that they had been detected by technology that was far more advanced than anything in the GDF inventory. "Contact," he whispered urgently. "They know we're here." The human figure began moving toward their position with the smooth, predatory gait of someone who was absolutely confident in their abilities. Behind him, other figures emerged from the shadows, both human and Shadowkin, working together with the coordination of a well-trained unit. "Exfiltration Route Alpha," Captain Thorak ordered, but Marcus was already studying the tactical situation with the same disturbing familiarity that had been plaguing him all mission. "Negative, Captain," Marcus said, his voice carrying a confidence that surprised him. "Route Alpha leads directly through a sensor net. We need to go southwest through the crater field. There's a blind spot in their coverage approximately 200 meters from our current position." "How do you know that?" Lieutenant Vex demanded. Marcus stared at his own hands as they moved over the sensor controls with practiced efficiency, calling up defensive patterns and tactical assessments that he shouldn't have known how to access. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know." As they began their retreat through the lunar landscape, pursued by forces that seemed to anticipate their every move, Marcus realized that his assignment to the 47th Expeditionary Battalion hadn't been random at all. Someone had wanted him to see this, to discover the truth about humanity's secret involvement in galactic conflicts. The question was whether that someone was friend or enemy, and whether Marcus would live long enough to find out. The pursuit across the lunar surface became a deadly game of cat and mouse, with Marcus's reconnaissance team desperately trying to stay ahead of forces that seemed to know their every move. The human figure leading the pursuit moved with mechanical precision, using sensor technology that was decades ahead of anything in the GDF inventory. "They're gaining on us," Lieutenant Vex reported, his compound eyes scanning the sensor displays as their team leaped between crater rims in the low gravity. "Whatever technology they're using, it's tracking us through our environmental suits." Marcus found himself analyzing their predicament with the same disturbing familiarity that had been plaguing him throughout the mission. Without conscious thought, his hands moved to his suit's control panel and began inputting a series of commands that would cycle their environmental systems through a randomized pattern. "What are you doing?" Captain Thorak demanded. "Disrupting their tracking algorithms," Marcus replied, though he had no conscious memory of learning how to perform such a modification. "If they're using quantum resonance tracking, we can confuse their sensors by constantly changing our emission signatures." The modification worked. Their pursuers slowed, their confident advance becoming more cautious as they lost the clear lock they had maintained on the team's position. But Marcus knew the respite would be temporary. Whoever was leading the pursuit clearly understood the same advanced tactics that he seemed to know instinctively. As they reached their pod's hiding place in the crater, Marcus activated the communication array to contact the Retribution. But instead of Commander Zethka's voice, he heard something that made his blood run cold. "Lieutenant Chen," came a voice that was unmistakably human, speaking with the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command. "This is Colonel Sarah Martinez of the Terran Liberation Front. We need to talk." Captain Thorak's fur shifted to deep blacks and purples. "How do they have access to our communication frequencies?" The voice continued, seemingly unaware of the chaos it was causing. "Lieutenant, your recent actions indicate that the memory suppressions are breaking down ahead of schedule. You're remembering things you shouldn't remember, knowing things you were never taught. We need to bring you in before the situation becomes uncontainable." Marcus felt the world spinning around him. Memory suppressions? Terran Liberation Front? The implications were staggering. "Who is this? What are you talking about?" "You know who I am, Marcus. the voice replied, and now it carried a note of sadness that made his chest tight. Or you will, once the blocks dissolve completely. You've been assigned to the 47th because we needed you to see what we've become, what we've had to do to protect the galaxy, while maintaining plausible deniability for Earth's government. Specialist Korth moved closer to the communication array, his scarred face grim. Lieutenant, I think we're beginning to understand what happened to the previous human officer assigned to this unit. Lieutenant Williams didn't transfer to a desk job. He discovered the truth about the Ghost Fleet. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Marcus realized that his assignment to the 47th hadn't been about advancing his career or gaining experience with elite units. It had been about recovering memories that someone had deliberately suppressed. The Terran Liberation Front, Marcus said slowly. That's the organization archivist Kelm mentioned. You're the Ghost Fleet. We are what humanity became when Earth's official government chose to ignore the galaxy's problems, Colonel Martinez replied. When the Shadowkin began their raids 40 years ago, when slave traders started harvesting human colonies that officially didn't exist, when the galactic powers decided that a few million deaths were acceptable losses, we became the force that stood between civilization and chaos. Captain Thorak activated his own communicator. This is Captain Thorak of the 47th Expeditionary Battalion. Colonel Martinez, you are in violation of multiple galactic treaties. Surrender your forces immediately. The response came as bitter laughter. Captain, your own battalion has been investigating our operations for 3 years. Commander Zethka knows exactly who we are and what we represent. The only question is whether the galaxy is ready for the truth about humanity's real role in galactic affairs. Marcus felt something shifting in his mind, like barriers that had been carefully maintained suddenly crumbling. Memories that weren't quite his own began surfacing. Images of battles fought in the darkness between stars, of operations that had saved entire civilizations while maintaining absolute secrecy. I was one of you, he whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Before my assignment to the GDF, I was part of the Liberation Front. You were our best operative, Colonel Martinez confirmed. Deep cover insertion into the galactic military structure, but the psychological strain of maintaining a false identity for years was breaking down your personality matrix. We had to perform memory suppression to protect both you and the mission. Lieutenant Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly. Lieutenant Chen, if what she's saying is true, then your entire service record is fabricated. Your academy training, your technical specializations, everything. Marcus stared at his hands, remembering how they had moved over unfamiliar controls with practiced efficiency, how tactical solutions had presented themselves as if from muscle memory. That's why I knew how to evade the Shadowkin interceptor. Why I could read their defensive patterns. I fought them before. Many times, the colonel confirmed. But the person you were before the memory suppression was becoming unstable. Too many missions. Too many necessary compromises. We gave you a new life, Marcus. We gave you peace. Peace built on lies, Captain Thorak growled, his fur now displaying the aggressive reds and oranges that indicated barely controlled anger. How many other human officers in the GDF are actually your operatives? Enough to ensure that the galaxy's defenders have the skills they need to face humanity's enemies, Martinez replied. The official Earth government wants to pretend that humanity can remain neutral in galactic conflicts. We know better. We've been fighting the real war while they play politics. Marcus felt the last of the memory barriers dissolving, and with them came a flood of experiences that he had never consciously lived. Night raids on Shadowkin slave ships, rescue operations on mining worlds where human colonists had been used as forced labor, battles against alien threats that Earth's government had never acknowledged existed, and through it all, the growing realization that the galaxy was far more dangerous than the sanitized version presented to Earth's population. Humanity hadn't joined a peaceful galactic community. They had entered a war zone where survival depended on being willing to fight battles that officially never happened. Colonel, Marcus said, his voice carrying a new note of authority that surprised his teammates. What do you want from me now? We want you to choose, Marcus. You can return to your false life as Lieutenant Chen, serving in a military that doesn't understand the real nature of the threats it faces, or you can remember who you really are and help us complete the mission that brought us here. What mission? The Shadowkin base isn't just a military installation. It's a breeding facility where they're creating a new generation of warriors enhanced with human tactical knowledge. If we don't stop them here, They'll have the tools they need to break through every defense the galaxy can mount. Marcus looked at his teammates, seeing the mixture of suspicion and concern in their alien faces. They had trusted him, accepted him as a colleague and friend. Now they were learning that everything about him was a lie. But as his memories continued to return, Marcus realized that the lies might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and chaos. The silence that followed Colonel Martinez's revelation stretched across the lunar landscape like a held breath. Marcus felt his recovered memories settling into place, years of suppressed experiences flooding back with crystalline clarity. He had been Agent 7 of the Liberation Front's elite insertion team, trained to operate behind enemy lines with absolute autonomy. But he had also been Lieutenant Marcus Chen, a GDF officer who genuinely believed in the ideals of galactic cooperation and peaceful resolution. The contradiction was tearing him apart. "Marcus," Captain Thorax said quietly, his fur displaying colors that Marcus now recognized as deep concern mixed with loyalty. "Whatever you were before, you've served with honor in the 47th. That counts for something." Lieutenant Vex clicked his mandibles in agreement. "The techniques you used to save us from the Shadowkin interceptor, those came from someone who values the lives of his teammates above his own mission parameters." Specialist Korth studied Marcus with those small, intelligent eyes. "I've fought alongside humans for 3 years now. The ones who serve with frontline units all have the same quality. They choose to stand between their friends and danger, regardless of the cost to themselves. That's not something you can fake or program into someone." Marcus felt something breaking inside his chest, a barrier between his two identities that had been maintained by necessity, but was no longer sustainable. "Colonel," he said into the communicator, "I need to know the truth about the breeding facility. All of it." "The Shadowkin have been capturing human prisoners for analysis," Martinez replied, her voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "Not just any humans, specifically members of Earth's military forces. They've been studying human tactical thinking, human adaptability, human willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. They're trying to replicate those qualities in their own warriors." Captain Thorax's fur shifted to the deep blacks that indicated genuine horror. "They're creating enhanced Shadowkin soldiers with human psychological profiles. More than that," the colonel continued. "They're creating Shadowkin commanders who think like human generals, who understand human weaknesses, who can predict human responses with perfect accuracy. The next generation of Shadowkin forces will be specifically designed to counter everything that makes humanity effective in combat." Marcus felt his tactical training, both the suppressed memories and the newer GDF education, analyzing the implications. That's not just a threat to human forces. Every species in the galaxy has developed military doctrine based on human tactical innovations. If the Shadowkin can counter those innovations, they can defeat any galactic military force, Specialist Korth finished grimly. "The entire defensive structure of galactic civilization is based on adaptations of human military theory." The weight of the situation settled over the team like a physical force. Through his recovered memories, Marcus could see the careful web of influences that the Liberation Front had woven throughout galactic military structures. Human tactical advisors assigned to alien units, human innovations quietly integrated into galactic defense protocols, human psychological insights used to improve interspecies cooperation. All of it would become a weapon in Shadowkin hands. "There's something else," Colonel Martinez said, and Marcus could hear the reluctance in her voice. "The breeding facility is being run by humans, Liberation Front personnel who were captured during deep cover operations. They've been turned, Marcus, broken and rebuilt into tools for the enemy." The personal impact of that revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He remembered faces now, teammates from operations that had officially never happened. Sarah Kim, who had infiltrated a slave trading operation and vanished during the extraction. David Rodriguez, who had been investigating Shadowkin technology transfers and stopped reporting 3 months ago. "How many?" Marcus asked. 17 confirmed Liberation Front operatives, plus an unknown number of regular human prisoners. "Marcus, if we don't stop this now, everything we've worked for over the past 40 years becomes meaningless. Every sacrifice, every life we've saved, every battle we've fought in the shadows." Captain Thorak activated his own communicator. "Commander Zethka, this is Reconnaissance Alpha. We have a situation that requires immediate command-level consultation." "Acknowledged, Alpha Team. came the familiar voice of the 47th's commander. Report status. Sir, we have confirmed that the Shadowkin installation is far more than a standard military base. We're looking at a strategic threat to galactic security that requires immediate intervention. There was a long pause before Zethka responded. Alpha Team, return to your extraction point. We're coming to get you. But Marcus was already studying the tactical situation with both sets of his memories, analyzing the base's defenses and the positioning of the Liberation Front ships. Captain, we can't wait for extraction. The facility has detection systems that will identify the retribution the moment it enters the system. If the Shadowkin realize they've been discovered, they'll accelerate their timeline. What timeline? Lieutenant Vex asked. Through his recovered memories, Marcus could see the pattern that had been invisible to his suppressed consciousness. The enhanced warriors aren't just being created here. They're being prepared for deployment. Those ships in the base's landing bay aren't just Ghost Fleet vessels, they're transports. The next generation of Shadowkin forces is ready to be distributed throughout the galaxy. The implications were staggering. Enhanced Shadowkin warriors, trained with human tactical knowledge and led by commanders who understood human psychology, could destroy the careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for decades. Colonel Martinez, Marcus said, making a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. What do you need from us? The facility's central computer core contains all the research data and the location of the enhanced warrior deployment sites. We need someone to infiltrate the installation and extract that data before we destroy the facility. That's a suicide mission, Specialist Korth growled. The base has hundreds of personnel and enough firepower to level a city. Marcus felt his two identities finally merging, the careful barriers between Lieutenant Chen and Agent 7 dissolving into something new. Not if we do it right. Captain, I need you to trust me one more time. Captain Thorax studied Marcus with an intensity that seemed to see right through him. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we finish this mission the way it should have been finished 40 years ago, Marcus replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had fought battles that history would never record. Together, the 47th Expeditionary Battalion and the Terran Liberation Front, working as allies instead of shadows. And after this mission? Thorak asked. What happens to the human officer I've served alongside for the past week? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since his memories had begun returning, the expression felt completely genuine. He continues serving with the 47th, sir, because Agent 7 learned something that the Liberation Front never taught him. Sometimes the most important battles are fought by people who trust each other completely, regardless of what species they are. As they prepared to assault a facility that represented everything wrong with the galaxy's hidden wars, Marcus realized that his identity crisis had resolved itself in the most unexpected way possible. He wasn't Lieutenant Chen pretending to be Agent 7, or Agent 7 pretending to be Lieutenant Chen. He was a human officer who understood that the galaxy's future depended on trust between species, and that sometimes the most heroic thing you could do was refuse to fight alone.